Is your baby throwing tantrums all day long? Just give them medication filled with heroin. Do you struggle with toothaches often? Just take some tooth drops loaded with cocaine. Are you interested in knowing what ingredients are in the food at your dinner table? Too bad, because no company is going to tell you. This all sounds absurd, right? Why would food and medicine be filled with harmful chemicals? It seems ridiculous. However, this is what America's food and drug industry was like decades ago. Let's go back to the early 1900s and see how our food, drugs, and medicine were truly being made. In the early 1900s, food and medicine was a necessity for men, women, and children. About 1/3 of America's population was in poverty, and it was hard for families to afford everyday items. As America's production system began to get more advanced, factories were able to produce more foods, such as meats, and medicine for illness much faster. If families could afford it, they would buy packaged items whenever they could, thinking it could cure anything. However, were people truly getting what they paid for? Companies were often very misleading with their ingredients lists, and society had no idea. Unlike today, companies were not required to write a full ingredients list on the product they were releasing to the public. This means they could get away with adding hazardous ingredients that were unknown to others. Companies were also not required to have a safe or healthy working environment. This meant that many producing systems were very dirty, with children or sick individuals working in them. Because of this, companies did not have to pay much money to keep their organizations going. They did anything they could to keep materials and equipment cheap, while still making as much money as possible off their products. In order to do this, they had to make their products well known. Like any company today, companies in the early 1900s would positively advertise their products. This included things such as posters, flyers, or a section on the newspaper. All of these advertisements were very pleasing and made consumers want to purchase them. But not everything being advertised was entirely true. Things were marketed as helpful, like Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, which was targeted towards children who were teething. Secretly, Mrs. Winslow's syrup was only soothing due to the added morphine and alcohol. Parents had no idea they were feeding this to their children. Even popular drinks such as Coca-Cola contained harmful chemicals like cocaine, and consumers had no clue. This was because companies were not required to have an ingredients list for their products. Companies would just package an item and sell it. Because of this, they would load their products with chemicals to make them last longer, taste better, look better, and work more efficiently. This happened with packaged goods, medicines, and even meat. After years of hiding, it eventually had to be uncovered. On November 4th, 1905, a man named Upton Sinclair published a book titled The Jungle. It was about how he investigated working conditions in Chicago's meatpacking industry to uncover how the company was producing their meat. He discovered that the popular industry was infested with rats and could have cross-contaminated to the meat our society was consuming. He wrote how it was a major health violation and how the American meatpacking industry was unsanitary. This caused public outcry, and America was instantly ready to make a statement. So, how would America take a stand against these injustices? They needed evidence and beneficial reasonings as to why things needed to change. Upton Sinclair's book also provided evidence stating that rotten meat was being sold to the public, and how chemicals, dirt, and sawdust were often used as meat filler. Sometimes, laborers would fall into vats and be turned into lard. Prior to the book's release, there were hundreds of bills related to regulating food and drugs. These all sat in Congress for decades, but no one actually made complaints to get them regulated. The Jungle finally gave that push these bills needed. Society needed to prove how dangerous the added chemicals to food and drugs truly were. If it was to continue for the long run, people could develop serious illnesses that could impact their lives forever. The president at the time, Theodore Roosevelt, was not Sinclair's biggest fan and thought of him in negative ways. However, Sinclair pushed through and ordered the U.S. Department of Agriculture to investigate these claims made. But his complaints were not properly checked and simply just came back as lies. But secretly, Roosevelt was not entirely sure if Sinclair was lying. He also was unsure of the meatpacking industry. He hired Labor Commissioner Charles P. Neal and social worker James B. Reynolds to do an inspection for him, and it came back as Sinclair's reports being true. As well as Sinclair's book, The Jungle, there were also other individuals who were on a mission to pass this law, and the journey may have started many years beforehand. Born in 1844, Harvey Wiley was an American chemist from Indiana. He started out as a chemistry professor at Purdue University and had a strong passion for his job. In 1883, he joined the U.S. Department of Agriculture, otherwise known as the USDA, and had the role of chief chemist. Over time, Wiley began to get concerned for America's food and safety purity, even if no one else had noticed at the time. He started testing different packaged foods and found hazardous chemicals in many of them. Wiley constantly put complaints and bills to Congress, but he did not have enough people to support him, so his claims were always denied. Many years later, in 1902, Wiley established a volunteer group to be his test subjects for his concern of food and drugs. They were known as the Poison Squad. The Poison Squad was a group of men who volunteered to put their lives at risk for Wiley's experiment. They were each given 3 nutritional meals daily, as well as proper health care if something concerning was to happen. Wiley would put things like borax in their butter, milk, or coffee, and formaldehyde would be in their meats. Copper sulfate and seltzer were even added to their fruit pies. These were all chemicals commonly found in food, and as is easily noticeable by their names, they are not good for human health. Wiley would begin at low doses and continue to add more until at least one of the men complained of painful symptoms like vomiting or dizziness. These people would then be executed from the program until they felt healthy enough to continue. This lasted between the years of 1902 and 1907. Within just a few weeks of the experiment, some men would experience terrible health issues. Wiley knew that if this was affecting young men, children and elderly could have been affected even more. Wiley had to prove himself to Congress, and things finally started to change. With Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, and Wiley's experiment with the Poison Squad, Congress eventually acknowledged that it was time for a change. Finally, after years of battling, Congress passed both the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. President Theodore Roosevelt signed the Pure Food and Drug Act on June 30th, 1906, and all dangerous additives and preservatives to food and drugs were officially banned. Over time, many brands got discontinued, and there were fewer and fewer reports of dangerous chemicals in our everyday products. And America's production system was healthier, cleaner, and more effective than ever. As well as the Pure Food and Drug Act being signed on June 30th, 1906, the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, was created. It was created to enforce the Pure Food and Drug Act, and people associated with the FDA are responsible for keeping America's food and drugs safe. Even today, the FDA is still in charge of regulating our food and drugs. From banning hazardous ingredients in our food to examining the chemicals used in our medicine, the FDA is always keeping America safe. America believes that our people have the right to access safe food and drugs no matter what the circumstances. Because of Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, and Harvey Wiley's experiment with the Poison Squad, we now have an amazing establishment known as the FDA that is responsible for our safety. The establishment of the Pure Food and Drug Act in 1906 is still keeping the people of America safe today.